Good morning, everybody. I'd like to say welcome to Rector of Universitas Negeri Malang, Professor Dr. Ahmad Rafiuddin, MPD. Before we start the program, I'd like to read briefly about the rules of this webinar. At first, please mute your Zoom to respect the speaker. If you'd like to ask the question, please raise your hand. Question can be written in chat room or YouTube live channel. And you also can comment in the YouTube comment. All participants are required to fill the attendance list, and the link will be shared in the middle of the program. Only participants who listen to the presentation until the end will get the certificate. And please subscribe and like our YouTube channel. It will be appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, the program will be shortly begin.
Selamat datang di Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Negeri Malang. Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Negeri Malang adalah salah satu dari 8 fakultas yang dimiliki oleh Universitas Negeri Malang. Visi dari Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Negeri Malang adalah menjadi fakultas ekonomi dan bisnis yang unggul dan menjadi rujukan baik di bidang pendidikan maupun di bidang ilmu ekonomi. Visi tersebut tidak saja sifatnya nasional tetapi juga internasional, sehingga ini akan mendukung keinginan dari universitas yang ingin menjadi universitas berkualitas di tingkat dunia. Beberapa hal yang dilakukan oleh Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis adalah student exchange. Kami telah melakukan berbagai upaya untuk pertukaran mahasiswa, tidak saja pertukaran mahasiswa di dalam negeri tetapi juga pertukaran mahasiswa dengan luar negeri.
Hello, my name is Mamun Halimov. I'm from Tajikistan. I'm student Master of Accounting in State University of Malang in Faculty of Economy and Business.
Faculty of Economy, bravo!
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the international webinar organized by Universitas Negeri Malang in collaboration with the Association of International Business and Professional Management, AIBPM. Your Excellencies, Director of Universitas Negeri Malang, Professor Dr. Ahmad Rafiuddin, MPD, the Dean Faculty of Economics, Universitas Negeri Malang, Dr. Cipto Wardoyo, SE, MPD, MSI, AK, CA. The Head of Accounting Department, Faculty of Economics, Universitas Negeri Malang, Dr. Satya Nur Maharani, SA, MSA, AK. The founder and president of AIBPM, HD. All keynote speakers and distinguished guest lecturers, and especially for all participants of today's event. It's our pleasure to be here to lead our today's international webinar, Sustainable Supply Chain Management. I am Aulia Hardiani on behalf of Universitas Negeri Malang and AIBPM. Appreciate you for taking your busy schedule to join us today, Tuesday, 11 August 2020. To conserve global collaboration during the pandemic COVID-19, We invite researchers to present their research results virtually. Today's webinar is designed to discuss the further direction of supply chain management. Thus, we would like to thank the Association of International Business and Professional Management, AIBPM, for hosting the event, and also to all speakers and panelists to make this morning event possible to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have 4 keynote speakers that will shed light on supply chain management, including what they have studied about it. The first speaker will be Professor Dr. Muhammad Mamun Habib from School of Business, Independent University, Bangladesh. The second one will be Professor Miguel Ignacio Cordova Espinosa from Pontificia, Universidad Catolica del Peru. Following will be Dr. Lakshmi Gandhan Sesha from Universiti Sains, Malaysia. And the last speaker will be Dr. Ranjith PV from CMS Business School, Jain, India, which is deemed to be university. The moderator for today's event is an associate professor at the School of Management, Universiti Sains, Malaysia, Dr. Daisy Kim Wei Ho. Morning, Doctor. Her fields of expertise are in human resource management, organizational behavior, work values, leadership, entrepreneurship, and psychosocial safety climate. Dr. Daisy holds a PhD in Business and Management from International Graduate School of Business, University of South Australia. Currently, she is an active academician and researcher supervising numbers of MBA, MA, and PhD candidates with working experiences across diverse industries. She has published good numbers of index journal papers. Ladies and gentlemen, today we also have 5 excellent panelists that will join the discussion. First is Dr. Rajesh Kumar Nair from SIES College of Management Studies, India. The second one will be Professor Camilo Perez Restrepo from Universidad EFIT, Colombia. And following will be Dr. Firdous Ahmad Malik from Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, Lucknow, India. And the fourth will be Dr. Nofrizel, SA, MM, CSLP, SLOP, the Chairman of Expert Board of Asosiasi Logistik Indonesia, ALI. He also served as CEO at PT Dewata Freight International Tbk and lecturer at Universitas Indonesia as well. The last but not the least, we also have Dr. Nurika Resunidia, SA, MSc, AK, CA, the head of Master Program in Accounting, Faculty of Economics, Universitas Negeri Malang. I would like to inform you that the hard copy is available with request and small contribution. The link will be shared at the end of the webinar. An e-certificate will be ready for 7 days after the program. Before we officially begin our program, we will solemnly listen to our national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, I would like to invite the Rector of Universitas Negeri Malang, Professor Dr. Ahmad Rofiuddin, MPD, to deliver a special welcome remark. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the international webinar organized by Universitas Negeri Malang in collaboration with the Association of International Business and Professional Management, AIBPM. Your Excellencies, Director of Universitas Negeri Malang, Professor Dr. Ahmad Rofiuddin, MPD, the Dean Faculty of Economics, Universitas Negeri Malang, Dr. Cipto Wardoyo, SE, MPD, MSI, AK, CA, the Head of Accounting Department, Faculty of Economics, Universitas Negeri Malang, Dr. Satya Nur Maharani, SA, MSA, AK, the founder and president of AIBPM, PhD, all keynote speakers and distinguished guest lecturers, and especially for all participants of today's event. It's our pleasure to be here to lead our today's international webinar, Sustainable Supply Chain Management. I am Aulia Hardiani on behalf of Universitas Negeri Malang and AIBPM. Appreciate you for taking your busy schedule to join us today, Tuesday, 11 August 2020. To conserve global collaboration during the pandemic COVID-19, we invite researchers to present their research results virtually. Today's webinar is designed to discuss the further direction of supply chain management. Thus, we would like to thank the Association of International Business and Professional Management, AIBPM, for hosting the event, and also to all speakers and panelists to make this morning event possible to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have 4 keynote speakers that will shed light on supply chain management, including what they have studied about it. The first speaker will be Professor Dr. Muhammad Mamun Habib from School of Business, Independent University, Bangladesh. The second one will be Professor Miguel Ignacio Cordova Espinosa from Pontificia, Universidad Catolica del Peru. Following will be Dr. Lakshmi Gandhan Sesha from Universiti Sains, Malaysia. And the last speaker will be Dr. Ranjith PV from CMS Business School, JIIN, India, which is deemed to be university. The moderator for today's event is an associate professor at the School of Management, Universiti Sains, Malaysia, Dr. Daisy Kim Wei Ho. Morning, Doctor. Her fields of expertise are in human resource management, organizational behavior, work values, leadership, entrepreneurship, and psychosocial safety climate. Dr. Daisy holds a PhD in Business and Management from International Graduate School of Business, University of South Australia. Currently, she is an active academician and researcher supervising numbers of MBA, MA, and PhD candidates with working experiences across diverse industries. She has published good numbers of index journal papers. Ladies and gentlemen, today we also have 5 excellent panelists that will join the discussion. First is the Dr. Rajesh Kumar Nair from SIES College of Management Studies, India. The second one will be Professor Camilo Perez Restrepo from Universidad IEVIT, Colombia. And following will be Dr. Firdous Ahmad Malik from Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, Lucknow, India. And the fourth will be Dr. Nofrizal, SA, MM, CSLP, SLOP, the Chairman of Expert Board of Asosiasi Logistik Indonesia, ALI. He also served as CEO at PT Dewata Freight International Tbk and lecturer at Universitas Indonesia as well. The last but not the least, we also have Dr. Nurika Restunidia, SA, MSI, AK, CA, the head of Master Program in Accounting, Faculty of Economics, Universitas Negeri Malang. I would like to inform you that the hard copy is available with request and small contribution. The link will be shared at the end of the webinar. An e-certificate will be ready for 7 days after the program. Before we officially begin our program, we will solemnly listen to our national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, I would like to invite the Rector of Universitas Negeri Malang, Professor Dr. Ahmad Rofiuddin, MPD, to deliver a special welcome remark.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everybody. Dear all keynote speakers, presenters, Dean of Faculty of Economic, and all participation. Firstly, allows pray and thanks into Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, who has actually been giving us some mercies and also through blessings, so we can dance as well as together in this time in excellent condition and also the light circumstance. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me as a Rector Universitas Negeri Malang, Indonesia, to attend this forum. We have encountered the Industrial 4.0 era with inevitability force and to move faster, especially amid the pandemics. All industries, special survival kits to shorten the change involved in any system. With what being said, our ability to accelerate in the more effective and efficient manners is necessary to bounce back after the suffering we have experienced. Recently, the worldwide citizens have witnessed an unprecedented trial swine in global supply and consumption. This rapid change has brought us to the so-called new normal, which challenged us to adapt in any ways to settle. For many strategic decisions makers and researchers like us, tackling the barriers has urged us to reach a transformative approach in activating more dependable business practice. Among the urgent matter we need to comprehend of is supply chain management SCM. SCM is an approach to or cycle models of a raw material procurement from suppliers to production processes in a company in which the finished good are distributed to customers. As we know, we think the prior supply chain management to be reapplied in the global business. However, the pandemic has unfolded how vulnerable the existing supply chain management is. Ideal supply chain management is set as ones that the stability links the supplies, output, and fulfills the demand. Digitalizations and automatizations have eventually become essential and fundamental necessities to overcome the vulnerability of SCM in this pandemic and or in the new normal era. Ladies and gentlemen, as reported by the World Economic Forum, we particularly need to reshape the futures. The industries depends on some country as their supplier has suddenly shrunk. For instance, the dominance of China as the world source of the production is now in question due to the impacts of the lockdown. This unexpected transition brings many leaders from a wide range of industries to hold discussion in order to prevent the worst and find the best scenario. This is difficult situation has shown us at least two things. First, it is hard for the companies to navigate, measure, and control the demand as well as to estimate the inventory either in short and a long run, due in the extreme decrease in productivity and economic growth. Second, the retail industry is unable to comply with the demand in pandemic-related goods because the market has been in a rush to avoid physical contact. Hence, adjustment in supply chain management, not only for the sake of the current condition, but also for the futures. Our discussion today is conducted by academic fellow as well as the business major stakeholder in this pandemic occasion to generate thoughts and discover a new approach to solve SCM problem in the condition in which all aspects voluntarily face dramatically and unpredictable change. Have any conference? Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dr. Ahmad Rafiuddin. Before we start the main program, I'd like to invite all keynote speakers, panelists, moderator, participants, as well as committee to take picture together. Thus, please turn on your camera. We have 9 pages here, so we will take the picture per page.
Okay, I'm taking the first page. No. The second page. The third page. Okay, the next page for now. The fifth page. Page. Okay, the seventh page. The eighth page. And now the last page. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody. Here we are now, the time to commence our fruitful and engaging today's international webinar. Thus, I'd like to invite the moderator to take over the session. Dr. Daisy, the time is yours.
Good morning and hello everyone, and thank you Alias for your kind introductions. And this is Dr. Daisy here. I'm the moderator of today's webinar, and thank you for joining AIBPM talk. And our title for today is about sustainable SCM, supply chain management. The webinar will last approximately for 2 hours. The schedule of today's webinar is each of the keynote speaker will be allocated 15 minutes for their presentations and then followed by questions and answer sessions, which will be approximately 60 minutes. Before we start the presentations, I would like to inform you the rules of webinar. First, all panelists and participants will be muted during the presentations. Next, there will be question and answer sessions after all 4 keynote speakers deliver their speech. Third, for panelists and participants, if you have any questions, you can click the raise hand button or you can write down at the chat column. Fourth, the moderator has the authority to choose who will deliver the question or suggestions. Fifth, all participants, panelists, moderator, and keynote speaker will receive the e-certificate. If you do not receive the certificate after 7 days, please do send an inquiry to email aibpm.conference@gmail.com. I repeat, aibpm.conference@gmail.com. And now let's start the presentations of our first keynote speaker. Our first keynote speaker is Professor Dr. Muhammad Mamun Habib from School of Business, Independent University, Bangladesh. Professor Dr. Mamun is a professor at School of Business, Independent University, Bangladesh. In addition, Dr. Habib is the visiting scientist of University of Texas, Arlington, USA. Prior to that, he was an associate professor at University Bangladesh, UNITA International University Malaysia, University Utara Malaysia, and American International University Bangladesh. Professor Dr. Mamun, the time is yours.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Daisy. So let me show my PowerPoint slide. Can you see? Yeah, thank you. Basically, as I am the first speaker for this webinar, so my job is the basically introduction about the supply chain management, introduction about the sustainable supply chain. So that my next fellow speakers, they will discuss more on particular topics in sustainable supply chain management. So I'd like to start the basic discussion on that. What is supply chain? Basically, you know that there is a lots of misconception about the supply chain. The first one is that if you ask anyone that what is supply chain, they are describe the supply chain different way. For your better understanding the sustainable supply chain management, I like to start by this one. What is the basic supply chain? When you like to design the basic supply chain, you have to ensure the few something like raw materials, finished product, supplier, customer, flow of goods for the manufacturing industry, flow of service for the service industry, flow of information, flow of fund. So this is the basic something. I think more or less we are familiar with this one, but you just remember that when you like to design the supply chain for the any industry, we have to taking care of these few entities, the three entities. Basically, I think you are familiar also about this one. This is a basic supply chain for manufacturing industry. So when you're thinking about the sustainable supply chain management in the ready-made garments industry, first of all, you have to know that how we can apply that one. So look very carefully. This is the basic supply chain for the manufacturing industry. There will be the supplier, what I said earlier. There will be the customer. Raw materials come from the supplier and finished product delivered to the customer and manufacturer, distributor, retailer. It depends on the type of the business, size of the business, whether they have or not. So that is the basic supply chain of the manufacturing industry. So what I mentioned here that whether the manufacturer or distributor, retailer will be available or not, how many distributors will be there, how many retailers will be there, whether there will be one factory or the two factory. Based on that, we have to design the supply chain. If you have a clear conception about the supply chain, then you can design the sustainable supply chain management. We are talking about the basic supply chain about the manufacturing industry. Now, let us see the basic supply chain for the service industry. So, you know that this is the service industry and the manufacturing industry. There's a basic difference. The service industry, our main prime target is to contribute to the society. The society is the consumer. So, when you are thinking about the about the service industry supply chain management, we have to think at further how we can contribute by the supply chain to the society. The same things you can see this one that you can see this one. There is a supplier, there is a customer. We have to identify the raw materials from the supplier, and we have to identify the finished product to the customer end. And service provider means what I said that if the hospital supply chain manager, then hospital. If the education supply chain manager, then university. And what I mentioned earlier, then when you design the basic supply chain for the service industry, there is the consumer, the society, the last customer, the end customer, final user, and user. So now, based on this, we have to think how we can design the sustainable supply chain management in the service industry. We are familiar with the example of the manufacturing and service industry. There are a few examples in the manufacturing and service industry. So when you are now, you have to think that which part we like to focus. We like to focus the ready-made garments industry. We like to focus the textile industry, apparel industry, fishing industry. We like to focus on the vegetable supply chain management, or we like to come back to the like service industry supply chain management, like education supply chain, tourism supply chain, hospital supply chain, something like that. So that is our idea that how we can apply the supply chain in our manufacturing and service industry. You know that we are familiar with this, why we have to need the supply chain management. I don't want to talk too much, but now the day is coming that we have to think about this one. We are thinking about that, like how we can improve the operation, so that when we are designing the supply chain, and this is the input, process, and output. So this is one of our target: how we can improve the operation, how we can ensure the better outsourcing, enhance the profit, customer satisfaction enhancement, generate quality outcomes. This something like that. When you are talking about the service and supply chain management, is one of the target quality outcomes. And so this is our target, that how we can ensure this one. Due to the global phenomena, now competitive pressure is very high. We have to think about that one. Now, you know that during the COVID-19, we noticed that we are applying the e-commerce lots of time, and there is all kind of communication we are doing now at this moment, the online mode. So how we can manage this one, the whole supply chain. And not only that, if you ask me that how you can define supply chain, I would say it's a very complex supply chain. And day by day, the complexity of supply chain is increasing. We have to think that many things, not only one supplier, many suppliers are there. Not only that one customer, many customers are there. Not only that supplier, we are thinking of the suppliers of suppliers. We have to think of the customer of customers. So that is the way that what I say, the complexity of supply chain, and how we can handle this one. So you have to analyze the supply chain. You see that we are talking about the supply chain, and this is the historical evolution of supply chain management. You know, I like to give some little bit idea about this one, so that anybody can understand why we are too much talking about the supply chain management. If you look back to the other area in the management, like the human resource manager, marketing management, they started their journey 200 years before, 300 years before, 500 years before. On the other hand, if you look very carefully, the supply chain management, they started their journey by the name of the logistic management. So the logistic management, they started their journey in 1950s in the defense. It's very interesting thing is that basically the military people, they have initiated the logistic management concept. So after that, in 1970s, the logistic management concept has been matured. And then after the 1970s, logistics management is incorporated with the supply chain management. If you look very carefully, that the 1980s, the supply chain manager officially initiated the journey. And after that official inauguration of supply chain management in 1980s, then most of the research on supply chain management or manufacturing industry, especially the materials flow, products flow, something like that. And the very interesting thing is that, and until now, if you look very carefully, about more than 85% research on supply chain management in the manufacturing industry, but only the few research, around the 50% research supply chain management service industry. So this is very key point is that when you deliver this kind of webinar as the keynote speaker, or one of the target, how we can give the focus on the future researchers, how they can conduct the research. I like to invite the young scholars. You have to do the more research on supply chain management. If you ask me the more particular avenue, I would say that you have to do the service in the supply chain management. And then if you ask me any further topics on that, I suggest the sustainable supply chain management on the manufacturing industry or service industry. Definitely the supply chain management service industry based on the sustainable concept, we cannot get lots of papers, lots of research as well. Okay, so what I said that after that 1980s, you see the 1980s, the starting point of supply chain management manufacturing is only 40 years. 1985, supply chain management, they started their journey in the service industry. That is another milestone in the service and supply chain management. Professor Farney, he developed the one model on the National Health Service. So that is the starting point of service and supply chain management. 1985 to 2020, only just 25 years. You know what I said, that human resource management, marketing management, they started their journey 300 years before, 200 years before. On the other hand, supply chain management, they just started their journey 40 years before, and service industry only just 25 years before. So in the research area, 40 years or 25 years is nothing. This is starting of the any kind of management area. So that is something. And then 2007, and the milestone in the supply chain management. Professor Lau, he developed the supply chain management for the education institutions. We call it education supply chain management. Unfortunately, in that research, Professor Lau, he developed the model, but that was based on the City University of Hong Kong. That was a case study. So, you know, the case study could not be generalized concept. And then 2009, the ITESA model was developed. ITESA model was developed. The model was developed during my PhD time. I developed this model with my supervisor. ITESA model stands for the Integrated Tertiary Education Supply Chain Management Model. That is the first empirical study on the education supply chain, and that was the like generalized concept, so that any university they can apply this model for the university. That is a supply chain management model for the university. That is an initiative for the service industry supply chain management. You know, I always mention that any kind of theory and concept always starting from USA, and then they convey the masses to the like the European country. Then it will come to our Asian developed country like Japan, Singapore, something like that. Then it will move to the like our subcontinent like India and so on. So that means that when we like to generate the new idea, new theory, it will take time to come about Asian countries. So that's why even if you look the history of supply chain management, they started the journey officially in 1980s, but it comes to the national level in the, around the after that one, like the 1990s and 2000. So that's why we have to need more research on supply chain management. I think I only mentioned this one about supply chain management in the manufacturing industry and service industry. I again remind you that there is a lots of research we can do on supply chain management in the service industry based on the sustainable concept. You see that supply. This is some of the examples that what type of research is going on supply chain management in the manufacturing industry. This is that supply chain management in the ready-made garments industry, and this is the supply chain management in the fishing industry. So this is supply chain management in the textile industry. I cannot discuss too much because I have a time constraint, and only the Dr. Daisy, she said that 15 minutes, so we have to finish within this time. So that is some of the examples that how we can design the supply chain management for the manufacturing industry. I just remind you again, when you are designing the supply chain, we have to think about the like three basic entities, like the raw materials, finished product, supplier and customer, how we can go for the flow of goods for manufacturing industry, flow of information, and flow of the fund, flow of money. That is the service and supply chain management. Basically, this is that tourism supply chain management. I think the Indonesia is very strong on the tourism, so they can apply this tourism supply chain management and sustainable tourism supply chain management. So that is some things we can have to think and discuss in the another session, not today. And this is that education supply chain. Basically, if you look very carefully, holistic view of education supply chain, we can also see this one, that there is supply input, process, and output. There's the raw materials, two raw materials we identified, and there is one in the student and the international research project, and two finished products we design. One is the graduate, and another is the outcomes, and finally contribute to the consumer, the society. This is a simplified form of supply chain management for the university. What I said earlier, supplier, service provider, customer, and consumer, something like that. And we already mentioned the two raw materials, one is the international research project, another student. And we already mentioned two finished products, what I said, the graduates and our research outcomes. It is very interesting thing is that when we design the supply chain model, it is not only our target to produce the finished product. Our main target is the quality outcomes. That is another discussion. That's why sustainable concept will be there. We have to think based on this one. This is an integrated form of supply chain for the universities. We divided the university in the two segments. One is the education, another is the research. So there will be the education supply chain and there will be the research supply chain. So if you look very carefully in the education supply chain, we have to think the education suppliers, then students, then the university education development, education assessment, then graduate, then education customer, and finally they contribute to the society, the consumer. On the other research supply chain, research suppliers, and then research project, and then it goes to the research university, research development, research assessment. Then it will go to the research outcomes, and then it will be belongs to the research customer that will contribute to the society, the consumer. So whatever you do in the services supply chain management, you have to think how you can contribute to the society, and that's why that sustainable concept is a major issue. How we can think of the social responsible supply chain management, how we can think environment friendly supply chain management. Basically, what I said earlier, this is not only our target to produce the outcomes, one of the target to produce the quality outcomes. So when you are talking about the education supply chain, so in this, that time we have to think of how we can produce the graduate citizen quality, how we can produce the quality business outcomes. So this is a very fundamental concept we have to think when you design the supply chain model for the service industry, especially the education institutions. I cannot discuss in details due to the time constraint. Basically, this is the ITESM model, Integrated Tertiary Education Supply Chain Management model. If you look this model, there's a few part of this model. One is the left side is the education supply chain, and the right side is the research supply chain. And the middle part is education management. So ITESC model, Integrated Tertiary Education Supply Chain Management model, consists of the three parts. The left side is the education supply chain, right side is the research supply chain, and middle part is education management. So look very carefully in education supply chain. You can see this one, the education suppliers, then there will be the students. This is the input, supplied input. We call it the raw materials. And then it will go to the university. The middle part is the university. This is the middle part is the university. And from the university, you get the graduates. And then we have to, it will contribute to the education customers, finally the society consumer. On the other, the research side is a supply chain. From there, we get the research suppliers.
Kasih no anu apa? Nusantara.
And then research project will enter to the university, and the university education management, and then from there we have to give the research outcomes that will be there, contribute to the research cost of finally the society. On the other hand, in the middle part, this education management, we divided the university into two segments, this education research, and there are four main activities in the university: education development, education assessment, research development, research assessment. At three decision levels: strategic, planning, operating level. And we identify the four factors in the university: the program establishment, university culture, faculty capabilities, and facilities. It means that we have to think about the education development, education assessment, research development, research assessment, and the four factors: program establishment, university culture, faculty capabilities, and facilities. So you look very carefully, even the development assessment should be concurrently. So what is our ultimate target is what I said earlier. Our target just not only produce the finished product, our target, we have to ensure the quality products, how we can add the values to the society. So when you design that education supply chain, we have to think about this one, whether we can add, contribute to the society or not. You know that this model was developed in the 2009, and after that, one of my, after this one, there are lots of research based on this model in the different countries, different universities, they are applying this model for the universities. And then not only there is a few PhD based on this model. One of my PhD student, he developed the next model after this one. He using this model as a theoretical framework, and then he developed a sustainable education supply chain manager for the Malaysian University. So look very carefully that now we are thinking after this one, as I said earlier, supply chain management, they started their journey officially in 1980s. So when you have this kind of research, now the prospective researchers, young scholars, they are thinking how they can apply that sustainable concept upon the university. Okay, so now you know that why I'm discussing the introduction part, so that you can get some idea that how we have to think that supply chain in the manufacturing industry or supply chain in the service industry. Now how we can apply the sustainable supply chain management. You know that more or less we have an idea about the definition of the supply chain management on the sustainable concept. Sustainable supply chain management involves the integrating environmentally. The environment is the issue. Financially viable practices. So the transparency, financially viable practices into the company's supply chain life cycle, the complete supply chain from the product design and development to the material selection, including the raw material extraction, agricultural production, manufacturing, packaging, transportation, warehousing, distribution, consumption, return, and disposal. This will recycle everything. Means this whole supply chain life cycle. We have to ensure that environment friendly, financially viable. So that is some things we have to think about this one. I think our perspective, my colleagues and the keynote speaker, they will discuss about more about this one, how we can apply the sustainable concept. You know, I use the term environmentally sustainable supply chain management and practices can assist the organizations in not only the reducing that that environment issue like their total carbon footprint, but also is optimizing. This is the most important thing, optimizing the end-to-end operations to achieve the greater cost savings and profitability. This is then cost savings questions coming there, financial viable, feasible as well. During the COVID-19, we are facing this problem. Most of the organizations, they are collapsed due to the supply chain disruption. And now come to the next question, how we can think, so how we can, the organization will be sustainable during this time, pandemic time. And our main target, the manufacturing industry, is to get the profit. So you have to ensure the profit not only and at the end at the one stage. We have to ensure the profit at every stages. Then how we can make how we can ensure this kind of supply chain profitability at the different stages of supply chain. That is our another discussion, another research on that. So now you understand that when you are thinking of the sustainability, the supply chain, and that we have to think of the few priorities. First of all, we have to think the environmental stewardship. If you look very carefully, most of the universities, they prefer the green environment due to the environmental issue. And we cannot do anything against the society, against the environment. So that is one thing. Conservation of resources. Any university, or not only university, any organization, any kind of manufacturing service, they always mention conservation of the resources. So they don't want to misuse, abuse the resources. A reduction of the carbon footprint, especially the manufacturing industry, they have to apply this one. Textile industry, ready-made garments industry, most of the cases, they're one of the target, how can they reduce the carbon footprint? Financial savings and viability. You know that there is nowadays, we like to apply another new concept of supply chain, that is we call it blockchain supply chain. The blockchain supply chain basically on the financial related. The finance will be there. Finance will be the viable, that the blockchain, they can see all stakeholders, they have idea about this one. And that's why you remember I mentioned earlier the flow of information. Well, nowadays we are talking about the information will be the integrated information, MIS system. There will be the software base, there will be the ERP base. So that will be the whole industry, all stakeholders, they can get the idea about what is happening, and the information will be viable. What is the financial condition? How we can take the decision for the next step, something like that. During the COVID-19, our already directors are, he already mentioned this one. We faced this first problem, because we are too much dependent on the China. Any kind of raw materials will come up from the China. When this, during the pandemic time, lockdown was already starting in the China, we couldn't get the raw materials, everything stopped. Our all kind of financial contribution has been stopped. Raw material, we can get the enough raw material, because we have, most of the cases we are dependent on only one supplier. But we don't have the multiple suppliers, multi-tier suppliers as well. So financial constantly was the very major issue at that time. Social responsibility. I just give you one example before finishing for today. It happens everywhere in the world that when there is a work supply chain, it started from supply and it goes to the customer. But sometimes we are not aware what is the chain is going on. Say, I just give one example. So say, suppose when the Donald Trump, he took the position as the US president, at that time his cap, that during his inauguration, his cap, and then his t-shirt, all are produced in Vietnam and Bangladesh. But if you ask that, do you know that from where you produce this cap, this t-shirt? Most of the cases they said they don't know. Even if you ask the Republican Party, do you know that from where you are getting this? No, because they did not give this order to Bangladesh. They did not give the order to the Vietnam. They provided this order to there is one hub, we call it the merchandiser. Say suppose in the merchandiser in the Hong Kong. So they give the order to the Hong Kong. Why they come to the Asia? Due to the cost minimized. And then Hong Kong, they're giving the order to Bangladesh. They give the order to the Vietnam. Unfortunately, even the Bangladesh, when they're producing the product, or Vietnam, they're producing the product, even they do not know that they're producing the product for the inauguration of the Donald Trump. And then what happened? Look very carefully. And that is, I don't want to mention the university name. University, they produce a t-shirt, and that t-shirt is produced in the Vietnam. And Vietnam, those are workers, they are working in that industry. Most of the female, and even the female, they are pregnant. They are pregnant, they are working in the industry, and they're producing the t-shirt for the university. When the University of the USA, they got this masses after producing this one. Because this is a responsible, they have to confirm The pregnant woman, if they cannot work until at the 9th month. So this is social responsibility. So that means when they will give the order, they have to notify them. We have to ensure who will be our producer, from which factory you have to produce. They have to think the whole chain so that there is some of the compensation they can provide. In in Bangladesh, we faced this problem earlier. The problem is that even they do not know what is the destination of their product, but unfortunately they're produced and they're getting only low cost. You just think that the low cost they're getting in Bangladesh, they cannot think. So the question is that, but in the merchandiser, they're getting a good amount of the money for this production. So now they come to the point that we have to need the viable information for the supply to the customer end. In the whole process, you have to know social responsible, and we have to take some responsibility. We cannot allow the woman, the pregnant woman, at the month of the 8 or 9. We can allow the kids. There is the age of the 10 years, 12 years. They're working in the industry. They're producing the dress, and the dresses are using the US, and they're using that in the different country. So now we have to think the whole social responsible supply chain management. Finally, the supply chains can be optimized using the sustainable practices. I think that our perspective, we also discuss lots of sustainable practices. Basically, supply chain sustainability practices, in order to succeed, must deliver the improved environmental performance within a financially viable operating construct. And how we'll design this practice, that is another research, that is another question, how we can ensure the supply chain sustainability practices. But before finish, I just give the one key, another forward to discuss in future, smart supply chain management. We have to think nowadays what is a smart supply chain management. We have to think of the social responsible supply chain management. And that day is coming that what I said earlier, you are producing suppose the ready-made garments industry, but you have to confirm that you are viable to get the information, the environmental situation in the whole supply chain. You have to confirm the quality outcome, whether it could be the fixed in the international level or not. Is it local market or international market? That is, we call it the smart supply chain management. Even the service industry, if you think the education supply chain, our target the smart graduate. Those will be the cope up with any kind of technological advancement. Nowadays, we are applying the technology advancement everywhere due to the COVID-19. But the question is that we are capable with the smart supply chain or not. And I already discussed social response supply chain management. That will be another discussion within the sustainable supply chain management. So that's all from my side. Thank you so much. Dr. Daisy, I'm so sorry I'm taking a long time. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Please, the floor for you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Mamun, for your insightful sharing and wonderful presentations on the sustainable SCM, as well as applications on the service industry and also education industry. And you have actually mentioned about smart SCM and social responsible SCM, which is actually very important in today trend. And thank you so much, Professor Mamun. And now we would like to invite our second keynote speaker, who is none other than Associate Professor Dr. Miguel Ignacio Cordova Espinoza from Pontificia Universidad Catolica del Peru. Dr. Miguel is an associate professor and internationalization leader for the management department and management school at Pontificia Universidad Catolica del Peru. Dr. Miguel has more than 8 years in teaching and more than 18 years of experience as manager and director in different economic sectors, such as food and beverages, constructions, pharmaceutical, electric energy, sport and information technology. He is a PhD candidate in the Strategy Management Program of Consortium de Universitas in Lima. He has doctoral studies at Copenhagen Business School and an MBA of Central Catolica. Dr. Miguel's research is actually oriented to power and influence in organization as well as sustainable SCM. The time is yours, Prof. Miguel.
Thank you so much, Professor Daisy, and thank you all the attendees at this session. I'm very pleased to be here with you. So I'm going to share my screen now. Can you see my screen, right? Great. Okay. Today we're going to talk about sustainable supply chains and their multi-level connectivity, and I'm going through this topic using 4 histories, and at the end we are going to do some final thoughts about the talk. So my first history here is at an individual level, a history of power. And why I call this a history of power? As Talbot said, when you drink a cup of coffee, you are completing the final link in a global chain of activities that made that cup of coffee possible. That simple act, that daily simple act of sipping your coffee connects you immediately to peasant farmers in Colombia and Indonesia, to dog workers in Sao Paulo and Mombasa, New Orleans and San Francisco, and so many others in between. So this is how individuals can connect to the world. We as individuals connect to the world through supply chains, because almost everything that we buy, use, or consume in our daily activity comes from supply chains. For instance, cars, planes, satellites, laptops, border wars, and of course services as well, comes from different supply chains that took their processes and several parts of the processes of the supply chain in different parts of the world, in different locations. So we as individuals can exert this kind of power by choosing what we are going to buy. We have this power to decide what we are buying and what we are using and what we want to consume. And this kind of power it's actually a huge power, and it's a power that connects us with the world through this supply chain activity. And the power of consumers actually quite like a ring of power. I mean, this is and that's why I call it a history of power, and of course a history of connection to how individuals can connect to the world in their daily activities. Our second one at an organizational level is a history of trade-offs. Okay, organizations are related also through this trade and commercial activities. So as Dr. Mamun said, we have several participants, several actors in the supply chain, as suppliers, factories, distributors, retailers, and so on. And as Dr. Mamun said also, they are connected through different flows like financial flows, material flows, and information flow. So they need to manage properly these flows through the whole supply chains and make this connection works in order to fulfill customers' expectations. And here, this is when our first trade-off appears, because these organizations need to decide. Mostly their decisions have to be made between a high-quality service and what is the cost of this high-quality service. So they have to take this kind of decisions of how could be my service and what it's going to be the cost of this service. And of course, if I want a high-quality service, sure, it's going to be much expensive. So this is our first trade-off, and a trade-off means like I need to sacrifice something. I need to give something, but I need to sacrifice as well another thing. And years later, we also have to adhere some environmental concerns to our supply chains in order to achieve a circular economy. So we need to incorporate in the supply chains some new operations or new processes, such as reverse logistics, for instance, or reduction at source, or provide different incentives to participants in order for them to acquire this sustainability or this pro-environmental practices. And another trade-off appears then, because companies also, again, they need to decide how many pro-environmental initiatives they want to deploy, because they thought that these pro-environmental initiatives were against the firm's profitability. So this is our second trade-offs here, and this is why I call this a history of trade-offs. Then, years later, at a sustainability level, we have this three-axis sustainability model of social concerns, economic growth, and environmental issues. And I call it a history of togetherness. Of course, we all know that according to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations is promoting, we need to achieve this Sustainable Development Goal towards the year 2030. That is the year of no return. So we have a stressed deadline actually for this. But the problem is that we not go further too much on this issue. All nations across the world, most of the nations, are in an inexplicable inertia. So a few was do, and probably nothing was doing from some countries regarding this 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So we have actually a huge problem with that. And this inertia is probably due because nations, individuals, and organizations as well were trading instead of synergizing. So as we were saying, when you trade, when you do some trade-off, you have to sacrifice something. And we're sacrificing all the time, all these years. Instead of doing synergies, instead of seeking for the good and wealth of every stakeholder in the system. So probably it's one of the main problems here. And even when these 17 Sustainable Development Goals are quite different and have specific targets, there are multiple synergies as well as trade-offs among them. So as the same in the organizational level, the organizations were connected inside the supply chain. The Sustainable Development Goals are also interconnected among them. They maintain several synergies and trade-offs among them. For instance, this SDG number 7, that is clean and affordable energy, and the SDG 13, that is climate action, could possibly be considered as global enablers because of their direct relation through synergies with at least 13 of the 15 SDGs left. I think there was no direct connection with the SDGs about reduction inequalities and gender inequalities, I guess. But I mean, SDGs are strongly interrelated among them. So that's why it's so hard to achieve sustainability. This is why it's so hard to synergize instead of trading. So I have this example in order to be clear of what I'm saying. These port-city relationships, for instance, postal cities have ports, and we all know that ports deliver the different benefits, financial benefits for cities. So they promote industry, innovation, and better infrastructure. We always are investing in expand operational capacities of ports, but in order to achieve decent work and to economic growth of the city and for the country as a whole. But we are trading as well, because it's too hard for a coastal city to achieve itself as a sustainable city. I mean, to become a sustainable city. Because we have pollution in the water, we have pollution in the air, we have uncomfortable noises, we have traffic in the city, we have delinquency, and we have organized crime as well. So it's too complicated to get rid of this kind of trade-off. So we need to provide. Okay, so we need to pay attention to this. We need to provide a good standard for living to the people in the coastal city. So we promote decent work and economic growth through port-city relationships, and we need to connect organizations as well in order to construct, to build this maritime supply chain through the port. But we have all these problems at the sustainability level. So we need these three levels: the individual, the organizational, and the sustainability level, fully interconnected. And before I go through this, and this is why I call this togetherness history of togetherness, because we need to think. We need to start to think in the world as a unique world, as a one world for all of us, and we need to fulfill all the expectations of the stakeholders related to. And the last level is a global risk level, and my last history is a history of sleepless routine. And why I call it history of a sleepless routine is because modern times, when all is changes, we need to be aware of what is happening every time and every day. Sorry for this chart is in Spanish, but I'm going to translate this first row in here. It says that the World Health Organization predicts by the beginning of 2019 that there is a probability of 1.5% of a severe pandemic occurs at the beginning of the 2019. So a year later, we have the coronavirus. It happened, and it almost dismantled all our supply chains as we know. And why is so important to think about this COVID-19 as a global risk level? Because this is the graphic of the global risk report of the 2020 of the World Economic Forum. So we have the coronavirus here as an infectious disease. As you can see, is in the periphery. I mean, this is not more. This is not too much. This is a global risk with not too much centrality. Actually, I mean, there are worst scenarios. So coronavirus is here, and this is this kind of crisis, this kind of global risk is actually fully interconnected with so many others. How we can read this? For instance, if appears something like COVID-19, of course, it's going to be water crisis in the countries and in the world. That is going to lead us to a climate action failure. And this is going to lead us as well to a food crisis, to extreme weather, and to biodiversity loss. That is actually happening. So this is how global risks are fully connected to in this fourth level, and it forces us to think of this interconnectedness if we want to take decisions and actions regarding supply chains, regarding global supply chains. And I have an example for this. For instance, copper, lithium, nickel, and cobalt, they are products of mining sector. And what was happening with this, due to the coronavirus outbreak in the world, people were not allowed to work as usual because they were under quarantine. They were under confinement in their homes. And of course, the mining sector were struggling for productivity, lack of labor. And with no productivity, with no labor or restricted labor conditions, we are unable to build the technological devices that prompt cleaner energy. So this is where when we understand this kind of situation as a symbiotic circle, we need to understand and to begin. We need to begin to think of this kind of problems as integrated in this 4-level model. So these are the 4 levels that I explained before. Just to summarize, we have people connected in the first level as individuals. We have organizations connected within the supply chains. We have the Sustainable Development Goals also fully connected among them, as we explained before. And as we just explained, and this is where this figure of the World Economic Forum works. These global risks are fully interconnected among them too. But this is not all. Actually, we need to think about this 4-level, not just connected among them, but of course, we have this fully interconnected model between the 4 levels as well. So if something like COVID-19 crisis happens again, of course it's going to be, of course it's going to have several effects on sustainability, on supply chains as individuals, and so on. Finally, just to finish my presentation, I wanted to provide I don't know how to say this, like a light in the darkness or something like that. Like that it's possible to find some industries with more synergies than trade-offs. A world with trade-offs, of course, is possible. And actually, we have no time for trade-offs. I mean, the deadline is 2030, and we need to, of course, decide for doing more synergies. And fishmeal supply chain could be an example. So fishmeal is produced using this pelagic species. Pelagic species of fish, they're small fish, and these fish are not so popular with human consumption because of their taste and because of their size. So we use this fish to do fishmeal, and fishmeal is the primary supply for one of the more sustainable industries to produce food for world's population, that is agriculture industry. So we need fish in order to feed other fish that is for human consumption. So and why is this is not a trade-off, and this is a huge synergy, not just because the importance of the industry, this agriculture industry, and not just because we are using a fish that it's not so popular for human consumption, but because I think the waste of the production process of fishmeal, the whole entire production process of fishmeal, is like 1.5% or something like that. So it's an industry with a few waste. And of course, this industry have opportunities that we need to fix. It's not perfect actually, this industry. But for instance, we need to control how fishing vessels are actually fishing these pelagic species, because if, for instance, if they are using trawling method, they are actually damaging the life below water. And we need to also supervise if they are fulfilling all the quality requirements for a clean production of the fish meal in order to provide a high protein feed to other animals as cattle or agriculture industry. So I wanted to finish my presentation with these 2 final thoughts. We need to learn how to think and how to decide within supply chains under this perspective, this new perspective of a multi-level interconnected system. We need to remember that we as individuals and of course, as part of organizations, we are taking decisions every day, and these decisions need to be under this new framework of multi-level interconnected systems of these 4 different levels. And the second one is related with the first one, is that individuals, we as individuals, that we have the power to decide what to buy, as well as organizations we're able to change the way we are connecting the world. And we need to change actually the way we are connecting the world. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. The time is yours now, Professor Daisy.
Thank you so much, Professor Miguel, for your awesome presentation as well as insightful sharing, and especially on the SCM as well as on the multi-level connectivity from individual level, organizational level, sustainability level, until global risk level. Thank you so much, Prof. Miguel. And now we would like to welcome our third keynote speaker, Dr. Lakshmi Gandhan Sesha from Universiti Sains, Malaysia. Dr. Gandhan is a lecturer of 30 years of working experience. Dr. Gandhan is involved in social services in the community regardless of race and religion. He has publications which are indexed by Scopus. And now we would like to welcome Dr. Lakshmi. The time is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Daisy. And also, I listened to 2 gentlemen. The speech was very interesting and very inspiring, especially when it comes to sustainability and also about the global risk. When we talk about the legal aspect, the first thing that strikes our mind is, of course, the global risk. Okay, my topic is about disruptive of supply chain, and this is being caused by lot of factors. It's not only by COVID-19, but also could be caused by natural disaster. Because today we are living in the world of uncertainty, and due to the climatic change, if you just open up the news, BBC or CNN, or even perhaps any international news, the first thing that strikes the mind is that the change of weather. And today, currently, we can see that globally, there's heavy rainfall, and one part of the world is getting too dry, and also the level of the water is increasing. And in matter of time, if human being is not going to live as human being, there's going to be a destruction of the global. Right? So all this due to the selfish of the human being. So when these things occurs, what is going to happen to us? That is the food, the production, the manufacturing, all would be affected. So in the legal term, it's called disruptive of supply chain. So mine is more to the British law, which Malaysia is part of the British administration once upon a time, which also include India, Bangladesh, Australia, and some other countries which fall within under the Commonwealth. And of course, there are some laws which is quite similar, which is applicable as a way of protection in case there's a disruptive of supply chain. Let's come back to COVID-19. No one expected the disease would reach globally. It has reached not only to the adult, today in America, it's also affecting the child, right? And sooner or later, they have to find for a solution. And we have to thank China. They already come out with a vaccine at the state stage. If once they pass the state stage, it will be even most of the people in the world would have this vaccine. So coming back to the disruptive of supply chain. So what happened if there is a case like in Malaysia where Vietnam terminated the contract to supply the rice? And the government in Malaysia said that, oh, we have a substantial rice which can last for 8 months. So minimum for the 8 months, they were looking for some other countries to supply the rice. And you know, our Prime Minister, the first, Dr. Mahathir, he had a visa understanding with India. The change of government, immediately they contacted India and they make a contract with India to supply their rice. So rice is one of the main staple food. If that is going to break the change, and other manufacturing sectors will be affected, right? So,
I'm sorry. Dr. Gandhan, do you have slides that you would like to share?
Yeah, I put my slide, but I don't know how to put my slide.
Okay, you can go to the share screen. Underneath at the bottom, you can see the third button is share screen. Just next to it and the record.
Okay.
You can just click on share. Yep.
Got ready?
Yes, we can see your slide right now. Okay. Dr. Gandhan, thank you so much.
Okay. I'm not going to touch this part about the supply chain management, as our two gentlemen have talked very widely, and they have covered up the entire scope, right? So let me go into the more detailed aspect, in more practical aspect, when it comes to a company or a country, when there has been a disruption. So in this disruption, we have, coming back even like in India, where, the workers don't want to collect onion because they fear that, they're going to collect onion, it's going to affect them and they will get the virus. So this totally affected the export of onion to other countries. So let's come back here. So the legal rights and obligation of disruptive of supply chain management, of course, when come back, the legal rights and contract of each jurisdiction. The law of Malaysia could be unlike the law of India, could be more like with England, but will not be similar with Saudi Arabia. So it also depends where the contract is signed. In some instances, when the contract is signed, let's say in China, the law applies in China. We cannot apply the Malaysian contract in China. Likewise, if the contract is signed in Malaysia, it applies in Malaysia. So it all depends which jurisdiction is being signed. Then, of course, we have to look in the terms of the contract. The terms of the contract could be classified as condition and warranty. The word condition is the main aspect of the contract. If the supplier or the country or the manufacturer fail to supply the goods in time, so what is the cost of action? The cost of action is to terminate the contract. But in a situation like COVID-19, can we terminate the contract? That's the issue. That will come later. So this China, of course, they have their own law, right? And as you know, most of the goods are coming from China. So we have the remedies available for each country's known as force majeure clause. The force majeure is known as the act of God. It's a French word, right? It's not a Latin word or English word. It is a French word, right? So it's due to the non-performance under the contract. So can a party terminate the contract? So COVID-19, as for instance, like China, we should, of course, praise China. You know why? They're very successful in containing the disease, all right? And to date, there's no second surge as in compared to America or even compared to India. The surge is increasing day by day. It's very frightening. But China is able to contain is COVID-19. They're very successful. And you can see them, they're even exporting the goods globally. They become one of the main supplier, right? So there are, of course, certain standards to be followed to use this major clause. So most contracts will be devised by lawyers, of international lawyers, who are lawyers in that field, to include the force major clause is to protect them in case of any eventuality, right? Here I use the word any eventuality. It could be a disease, it could be a catastrophe, it could be a destruction, or even could be a what you call geopolitics, all right? Now we also come across with most of geopolitics in South China Sea, we're coming across, all right? And this would also affect the relationship of each countries, and that's going to affect that country, and that are going to affect the supply of the goods in other country. And that circumstances can we use the force major clause. So the court would ask, to what extent you have been affected by the inability to supply. If the inability to supply is just for a short period of time, then the thing will be allowed. I mean, there will be some reasonable, the reasonable ground to allow the extension of the time, and so when everything is recovered, then you can supply the goods. But then the law says that you have to mitigate. The company is supposed to produce goods, or let's say like Vietnam is supposed to supply rice, but they simply terminate the contract. Of course, Malaysia may have the cost of legal action against Vietnam for not supplying the rice, because they have to mitigate. Mitigate in the sense means they have to look for alternative country to supply the rice. Failing which, they simply terminate the contract, putting Malaysia into jeopardy, into a very difficult position, and have to look for the alternative supply. So of course, in matter of time, there'll be some discussion at the political level, and probably they will get some compensation. Okay, coming back to China, what they did was they issued a certificate during the month of January to March, where China was not able to supply the goods globally. So what they did was they issued the certificate of major clause, giving the protection to the particular company. So, the international other global countries, they said this is very unfair. If you're going to protect your particular company, is that the other part, the recipients, is in jeopardy. So they cannot take any course of action against China. So only protect that certificate, only protection of that particular company in China. But then eventually there was some discussion. So they have waived it, not to issue the certificate at the moment. Right? So can the contract be frustrated if the COVID-19 extends for a period of 1 year? Yes. A period of 1 year, then the contracts becomes frustrated. The word frustration is, of course, came from English law. The contract is incapable of performance. That means, I give a good example of the word frustration here is that an earthquake has occurred, the building has collapsed. So it is impossible for the developer to redo the building. Then the law came back again in UK. The contracts become radically different. It means totally different to perform the contract. So the contract becomes frustrated. In that respect, the contract has been frustrated if in that case a country has signed the contract let's say Malaysia sign a contract with another company in China to supply, let's say, all the computer components, all right? And the factory in China has burned down, all right? So, of course, the contract is terminated. So what the law says, the English law says that you have to pay for the cost of the materials being produced, not for the total cost. So in that company, only have to pay for the cost, nothing much. So the contract comes to an end. But coming back to COVID-19, can a frustration could be applied? No. COVID-19 doesn't last very long. And only it looks like USA has been extending too long, right? It's unbelievable. It become one of the topmost country, its highest number of cases today in US, right? And now has already got these young children. But of course, not other sectors have been affected to make the contract become frustrated. So the only thing is that they can use the force majeure clause, right? They call it the act of God, to allow the company to come back. Just like, you know, in Ohio in America is a very famous place in the US, you know, there are a lot of meat. So that one of the workers in the US in Ohio was got a COVID-19, and the whole plant was put into hold, and they sanitized the whole area, and then they put, you know, 14 days for them to rehabilitate, and after that, after the clearance and sanitization, then they start production. So that is applicable. But another good example is that China has terminated a contract with Australia, where Australia was the largest supplier of meat to China. But because of some political reasons, China has terminated, and that is, it doesn't come under these force majeure clause. It comes on the issue on political matters, all right? It's not to be discussed here at the moment, but just to give you some, what is happening globally at the moment. Then coming back to the force majeure clause, in Saudi Arabia, they have in Middle East, they have their, has been codified, known as the hardship events based on Sharia law. So most Islamic countries, they have the Sharia law. They may not incorporate the British law or the common law, and they include those hardship events, which is quite alike, very similar to this major clause. So it says that a specific consideration, the relevant code is required. For example, Article 249 of UAE Civil Transaction Law and Article 171 of the Qatari Civil Code. So it is similar like force majeure clause.
Dr. Gandhan, I'm sorry to interrupt. Because due to the time constraint, is it possible for you to go to the conclusion on your presentations?
Okay. Just give me just 15 minutes. Okay. All right. And also just to brief out is that, so one of the consequences of this COVID-19 or all this natural disaster, it may also lead to the financial uncertainty and insolvency. So the word insolvency means there's a possibility the company may go into a bankruptcy. So since because of time constraint, I couldn't proceed much, but I just elaborated on this frustration, the terms of contract, and the main part is the major clause, which is very practical at the present moment in any business transaction. Thank you so much. Dr. Daisy, are you there? Hello.
Dr. Gandhan, thank you so much.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much, Doctor.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Gandhan, for your wonderful sharing and especially the interesting insight on the disruptive SCM as well as the legal issue and the remedies. Thank you so much. And now we would like to move on to our last presenter. Our fourth keynote speaker is Associate Professor Dr. Ranjith PV from CMS Business School, Zain to the University, India. So Dr. Ranjith is an Associate Professor of Decision Science at CMS Business School, Zain, Dean to be University. Dr. Ranjith is UGC NET qualified and has close to 2 decades of experience in teaching. Dr. Ranjith has published articles in different areas of management, and his areas of interest in research are service quality, operation management, and consumer behavior. Dr. Ranjith, I pass the time over to you. Thank you.
One minute. Sorry. Is this visible? Dr. Daisy is visible? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, AIBPM. Thank you, professors. Thank you, participants, and for giving the opportunity for me. I think we had discussions ranging from definition of supply chain management to the logistics side, to the sustainability factor, to the legal side of it. Now let's go into some of the things which I already think these are. To be very frank, I'm not an expert in supply chain management. Whatever I've read, whatever I've covered, I'm just giving inputs into that and giving and presenting, so that if there is a food for thought for you from that, I'll be definitely satisfied. So sustainable supply chain management, the way forward. And if you look at supply chain management, this is going to be the era of SCM. We are talking about a growth rate of 11% for the next 5-6 years. We are talking about an industry which is going to help all the other industries to grow. So it's imperative for us to look into that from that perspective and understand how you can take it forward. So if you look at countries across the world, some of the things are very common during the last 5-6 years. The one common thing is basically the technological aspects which has come into prominence. Another thing is the shift in business towards the Asia Pacific region and the Middle East countries. So if you look at all these situations, and if you look at the importance of countries like China and India in the global scenario, it's imperative to understand what is supply chain management, how it is going to contribute to the growth of the world economy. So it's always also important to understand how the social factors, how the employee factors, and how the environmental factors come into prominence as far as this particular area is concerned. So if you look at the companies which are doing very well in supply chain management, we are not going into definitions, etc. All people have already gone through that, so let me not go into that. So if you look at the companies with best supply chain, you can see the companies which are there like Nestle, Pepsi, Cisco, Intel, etc. The companies which are doing extremely well in the global scenario as far as business is concerned. So you can clearly say that supply chain strength will help the companies to go ahead as far as market share is concerned and ahead as far as profitability is concerned. One more important issue which is really causing problem here is, how do I balance my response to the customers, and how do I make sure that I reach to the customer faster at the same time being efficient? And I think, sir, the professors already talked about the importance of transportation, the importance of sustainability, the importance of location. I will add some more points like importance of facilities, inventory, etc., which will help to manage the way we can respond to the customers, at the same time being efficient in terms of giving less inputs into managing the whole show. So how do you balance this? How do you make sure that you reduce the cost, you reduce the risk which is there as far as supply chain is concerned, at the same time give the best service to the customers? And that's where the talking point is. And that's where, if you can manage it, definitely those companies will be ahead in terms of supply chain. Obviously, those companies are able to give a lot of value to the customers, thereby profitability. Now, definitely, when you look into the supply chain management industry, COVID-19 has affected it in a large scale manner, especially due to the problems which has happened in reach and transportation. A lot of trucks being not utilized, transportation is really affected. The uncertainty, and if you ask the industry people, the one question which, one problem which is there is the forecasting aspect. Understanding what is the demand, what is the supply which is required for the customers, that's going to be a problem. Sourcing is another problem. How do I manage the supplies? How do I make sure the supplies are able to give the raw material and things to the customers? That's going to be another problem. Obviously, this will contribute to managing the risk in the entire supply chain, in terms of reaching, in terms of uncertainty, in terms of maintaining customer relationship, and also reducing the cost. So that's going to be one of the problems you're going to face. Just let us think about something. 56% of online consumers between age of 18 to 34. That's a real good age for growth, and that's a real market for you, right? They will have a lot of expectation. They would like to have on same day online delivery, right? That's going to be the situation for now. And in this particular scenario of COVID, it's going to be huge difficult. Highly efficient, reducing costs, we already talked about. We have to connect it with customers. That's going to be, so marketing, we have to have a very good collaboration with the marketing department, so that your customer relationship is maintained in the right way and you're able to satisfy the needs of the customer. And that's where your big data, that's where your analytics, that's where your optimization comes into picture, right? And very importantly, it's absolutely essential for us to maintain flexibility, being agile, being responsive to what customers require, being a combination of online and offline in terms of transportation. That's going to be an important thing. And as what I've already told, balance between responsiveness and efficiency, that's going to be the challenge. And that if you connect it with the demand of the customers want to have online delivery on the same day, is going to be a huge problem. So some of the factors for revival, you can see that technology, digitization, collaboration with the supplier, agility, localization. So you have to think about being global, definitely, because it's a global village. But at the same time, you have to be local. You have to manufacture. You have to source locally, which will help them to reach to the customers faster. Why don't we think about vertical integration? That's going to be the mantra. Why are talking about only manufacturing? Why can't you think about sourcing also? Like what Zara is doing, right? Why not get into vertical integration, which will help in being local in all the sectors, being flexible in all the sectors, which will happily manage all this pandemic problems, the uncertainty effect, bullwhip effect, which is basically the uncertainty which happens in demand, the level of forecast being different, right? All these problems can be satisfied with being technologically driven, being optimized, being using analytics and having a local production and sourcing. Now, obviously, you have to have very good forecasting techniques. Big data becomes very useful. You have all the techniques which is coming in now. We foresee a lot of collaboration between supplier, manufacturer and customer. That's end-to-end visibility is going to be the situation. The customer collaboration is going to be very important. That's where your CRM will become absolutely essential. Resilient supply chain to manage the cost, being strong enough, being flexible enough. Investment is required in that, right? A lot of risk mitigation has to happen. A lot of technology has coming in, as usually said. Quality has to be maintained. So how do you maintain all these things at the same time, reduce the risk and reduce the cost? That's going to be the question for tomorrow. So is it the end of supply chain management? We can't say, because it's going to be different. It's going to be highly automated. It's going to be technologically driven. It's going to be controlled by digital towers. It's going to be controlled by intellectual automation. Employees are going to be completely on the intellectual side, data analysts, right? And a lot of vendor management, a lot of strategy. So we will see a huge amount of shift towards strategic management. So that's going to happen. And it's not the end of world, especially for employees. There is scope, but there's a lot of going to be a shift in the way employees are managed. That's going to be the situation. So I did a small research on to find out what are the challenges and solutions using literature review. And what I found out is we know this already. ROI is affected, the logistics is affected, imports is affected naturally due to the pandemic. But you can see quality and returns is not much affected, because if you see that people are being neutral in that case, right? But a lot of people are agreeing that ROI is affected, because scale is from 1 is strongly disagree to 5 is to strongly agree. So a lot of people are agreeing that logistics is affected. That's going to be the million-dollar question. How do you manage this? So what are the solutions? Again, using literature review, same rating. What I found out is a lot of technological aspects, a lot of analytics, a lot of automation, a lot of customer service, right? Optimization, being sustainable, the factor which we are talking about, being sustainable, being environmental consciousness, being local manufacturing and local sourcing, right? That's going to be also another important thing. So localization, sustainability, automation technology, customer service, that's going to be the era now. So imports the problem, localization is the best solution, self-reliance is going to be the next scenario. So you see the Samsung, how they're gone about it. There are some factors like cost, human resource, on-time delivery, supplier response to risk. So everybody is given equal importance. There is factors for human resource. There is an on-time delivery. There is importance for cost. There is how we collaborate with the suppliers. That's happening. Right now, we'll go into the sustainability. So sustainability is basically you're talking about, everybody has talked about how do you manage people, environment, and profit. Very simple. In all the aspects of manufacturing, packaging, distribution, warehousing, everywhere. So how do you do it, right? And that's going to be the important thing. So end-to-end visibility by integrating all aspects, but at the same time thinking about environmental situation, right? And that is where the role of employees come. They have to manage profitability at the same time, think about the aspect of technology. So technology, resilience, localization, automation, these are all help to manage the sustainability. So you need factors, you need communication, you need supply performance, you need collaboration, you need employee motivation, you need technology, you need vision. Then only you can take supply chain into a way of sustainability. So these are the factors of influence. We already discussed most of the things: automation, forecasting, analytics, legal affairs, which my previous speaker has already talked about, the data management, the big data, the real-time visibility, very, very important aspect, the planning aspect, the environmental scanning, which is also going to be important issue. So some of the things which I will rush through, one research paper defined sustainable supply chain to have emphasis on local consumption, which we already talked about, localization, the role of intermediaries, very important, suppliers and other aspects, and distributors, government support, a lot of investment in this particular aspect, and obviously what we are now seeing, online tools. So some of the companies have gone into manufacturing hand sanitizers and things which are required for COVID because of all these issues coming in. And vertical integration is going to be the situation now, which even companies like Zara is doing it. So 5 trends which are going to go about it: managing supply chain disruption by using innovation, visibility, which I talked about, using technology, automation, robotics, etc., transportation using your driverless vehicles, analytics, etc., and shorter supply chain. Can you make it very short, right? So end-to-end visibility, flexibility, reduced wastage, which my previous speakers already talked about, big data, and at the same time have better margin. Future of SCM will be without employees as much as possible. Companies are recruiting people, but they are recruiting for knowledge workers. Intellectual automation, end-to-end visibility, service. It's going to be a service for the customer, and obviously think about employees, invest. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, we'll come to that. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Daisy, ma'am. I hope I've stuck to the time.
Thank you, Dr. Ranjith, for your insightful and interesting and informative sharing, especially on the sustainable SCM, as well as the way forward, which you have actually included the role of technology, as well as the challenges and solutions for SCM due to COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you, Prof. Ranjith, for your sharing. And now we would like to move forward to our question and answer sessions. And I would like to introduce our panelists. We have 5 panelists for today. Our first panelist is Dr. Rajesh Kumar Nair from SIES College of Management Study, India. Dr. Rajesh Kumar holds a PhD in Commerce and Management with a total in Corporate and Academic in MBA College. He has been a consultant to various SME. All right, so now we would like to invite Dr. Rajesh to provide his view on our presentations today, as well as if he has any question that he would like to raise to our keynote speaker. I pass the time to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Daisy. A wonderful, presentation by all our keynote speakers. Thank you for, giving us wonderful insights on this topic on supply chain, and especially as we all agree that during this pandemic scenario, there's a big challenge, to look into supply chain. I'll share a few experience of me, especially when I was in industry with respect to supply chain. When I was working within a food industry, okay, and especially Venky's as a brand, where we were dealing with chicken in minutes. Okay, one of the challenges for us basically was how to maintain the cold chain. Okay, how to maintain that cold chain right from our factory to a distributor to the retailer. So all our products, chicken in minutes, basically need to have a temperature of minus 25 degrees Celsius. So the challenge over there, especially in my work was how to maintain the cold chain aspect. And we found immense challenges during, especially to, because the cold chain normally used to be maintained at the factory level or at the distributor level. To maintain, especially at the retailer level or the dealer level, was a challenge. So it's really a challenge. And now, as all of us was talking about, there are also challenges of new technologies which is coming in supply chain where one needs to be abreast about. So my question to Dr. Ranjith is basically, since you have mentioned about sustainability and the technology aspect in supply chain, could you highlight what are the challenges for implementing technology in supply chain management? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh. I think there might be a lot of challenges, but one important thing which definitely we should look into is how we can able to reach to the customers faster. In that case, I think one or two major issues is, one is how do we penetrate, I think the innovation. This is basically more of an innovation. How do we make people to come out of innovation resistance? So that's going to be challenge. Changing the way people think, it's going to be an issue. Second is of course the infrastructure aspect. Look, how do you manage the infrastructure? How government can invest on that so that the infrastructure can be improved to reach to the customer. Obviously, the customers have to be taught, educated. Their technological knowledge have to be improved. They have to come out of the innovation resistance. So a lot of investment is required, a lot of education is required, and you need support from all corners of the support, government as well as people, to make sure that it will be reaching to the end. And it will take time in a country like India, or if you look at the world, it will take time. For the penetration of internet is definitely maybe very less, maybe around maybe 20%, 25% across the world. So if we want to make it into maybe 50% or 60%, it will take a lot of time. So a lot of investment, a lot of patience, a lot of initiatives have to be incorporated into this for making sure that it will happen. It will not happen very soon. Definitely, it will take time. Thank you I hope I have answered your question.
Thanks, Dr. Ranjith. Thank you, Dr. Daisy, and thank you, AIBPM, for giving me an opportunity as a panelist. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh, and also thank you, Dr. Ranjith, for your sharing. And now we would like to proceed to our second panelist, Professor Camilo Perez from Universidad, Colombia. Professor Camilo holds a Master in Public Policy from the National University of Singapore, and he had a double degree of double degree of Bachelor in the International Business from Universidad Columbia and E.M. Strasbourg Business School, France. Professor Camilo has served as an advisor to international institutions in Canada and Singapore. And between 2014 to 2017, he served as a consultant for the public sector and companies in Colombia. And Camilo served as Deputy Director of the Center for Asia Pacific Study at Universidad. And Professor Camilo, would you like to share your view on the SCM as well as if you questions for our keynote speaker? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Daisy, and thank you everybody for the presentations. It was very enlightening, and it was very interesting to see how the challenges that we have with regard to supply chain management are very similar around the world. All the things you mentioned, all the challenges that we have now with regard to logistics, with regard to infrastructure, but also with regard to the legal framework, are challenges that we also have here in Latin America. So it doesn't matter how we come from different backgrounds, how we have different allocation of resources, we share some of these same obstacles. So that is something I wanted to highlight because it's interesting to compare the two regions. And the other thing that I wanted to highlight, which was mentioned during the last presentation, is how technology is bringing these innovations that are helping companies, but are also helping other stakeholders across the supply chain to become much more aware of the power they have in terms of sustainability. So along with that, with this idea of involving different stakeholders, I want to ask Professor Cordova about the idea of engaging customers to be a more responsible stakeholder, a more active participant in this sustainability. How can companies promote this engagement?
Thank you. Good to see you. Okay, yes. Regarding this engagement with the consumers, I think consumers, as we were saying, they have a huge, big responsibility in order to be aware what things they are buying or consuming. So they need to be informed, they need to inform themselves about the methods of production, the procedures and the processes, and where the supplies come from in order to build this supply chain, and be aware of not just about the products features or product specifications, but all the resources and inputs that finally achieve to make a product. So basically, consumers have this strong responsibility with their consumption, and on the other hand, firms have a strong responsibility as well to provide good information to customers in order for them to decide good. So this could be a real challenge for firms, because as Professor Ranjith was saying, the importance of this, the incorporation of technology and the incorporation of firms on digital revolution. They need to incorporate this technology that allow them to provide enough information to their stakeholders, not just consumers, but suppliers and customers and many intermediates in between the supply chain. So, for instance, blockchain it's quite good for that, and I'm going to refer to my favorite supply chain, that is fishery supply chain. For instance, thanks to blockchain, it's possible to know where exactly a fish is captured in the ocean, how far from the coast, how is the amount of the quantity of the fish captured in order to protect the sizes and the young species, to protect the biomass reproduction in the ocean. And due to blockchain also, it's possible to know which species are being captured in order to protect endangered species, for instance. So, and consumers need to be aware of this. Consumers need to know how firms are responding to the sustainability challenges and how firms are achieving these goals. So as I finished my presentation some minutes ago, I think firms and individuals need to decide to provide this information and how they are connecting through their daily economic activities.
So yeah, everything about transparency and sharing information was important. Thank you very much.
So we are not able to hear.
Oh, sorry. Is my mic working there?
Okay, thank you, Prof. Camilo, as well as Prof. Miguel for your wonderful sharing. And now we would like to invite our third panelist, Dr. Firdous Ahmad Malik. And Dr. Firdous is actually from Baba Shahid Bhimrao Abbey, Lucknow, India. Dr. Firdous is a full-time PhD fellow at Baba Shahid Bhimrao Ambedkar University. His research area of interest is on financial behavior, financial inclusion, and financial literacy. Dr. Firdous, I would like to invite you to share your view on SCM, and also I would like to invite you to ask questions on our keynote speakers. Thank you. Dr. Firdous? Dr. Firdous, the floor is yours. Dr. Firdous?
I think power supply is gone, I think.
All right, I see. Thank you so much. And maybe I would proceed to our fourth panelist, Dr. Nofrisel, SEMM CSLP, who is the chairman or expert board of Asosiasi Logistik Indonesia, as well as CEO PT Dewata Freight International. Dr. Nofrisel holds a PhD in strategic management. He is now a lecturer with Universitas Indonesia. He is also the president director of PT Dewata Freight International and the chairman or expert board of Asosiasi Logistik Indonesia. He has been working in numerous logistic SCM fields. Dr. Nofrisel, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Daisy. First of all, I would like to congratulate the University, State University of Malang for holding this international webinar. It is my honor to be present with experts on global supply chain management from reputable universities and also global multinational companies. As represents the Indonesian Logistics Association and my company PT Dewata Freight International TBK, to convey my pride and salute for organizing this seminar webinar with a very actual topic about the sustainable supply chain management, especially in the midst of the world facing COVID-19, which is unknown when it will end. For the speakers, I have already asked a question to all speakers via email, and I hope all speakers can give their response. And if you want I want to re-announce the question. Maybe no problem for me, but if you have already read my question, you can directly answer my question. Thank you, Dr. Desi.
So, Dr. Daisy.
Thank you, Dr. Nofrisel. So, Dr. Gandhan, the time is yours.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Daisy. I saw the question already. Right. Post COVID-19 pandemic, in fact, at the moment, a lot of issues at the moment, and we see a lot of financial uncertainties, and we look at the stock market globally, a lot of shares are going down, and some shares are going up. There's shares like, like glove, especially in Malaysia, the glove is shooting up, like skyrocketing the share market. And those like pharmaceutical companies also doing very well. And those essential goods are doing very well. That is at the moment, COVID-19. But what is going to happen after COVID-19 is over, there could be a lot of things could be going on. As we know that there's a trade war between America and China, right? There's always things going on. And what is going to affect is still unpredictable and no one knows at the moment. And what is going to be the currency, which currency is going to be strengthened, or is it American currency is going to collapse or not? It's still full of uncertainty. Regarding about the other one, like question regarding about insolvency and uncertainty, definitely there are a lot of companies are facing insolvency. Right? In Malaysia, we have the Companies Act of 2016. Right? If a company is very stable, they give an opportunity to rehabilitate. If the company is not able to pay its debt, of course, the creditor will try to wind up, or of course, the company has to petition for bankruptcy. And similarly, I think so this will also happen in America, Australia, and throughout globally. Regarding next question, threat from developed countries to globalization, I mean, the threat is more to the developing countries rather than the developed countries. So most developing countries, just like Malaysia, India, or even Bangladesh, they're all coming up, they are known as emerging economics. So anything that is a jerk in any of the economic flow may affect the country's gross domestic product. I think I've answered the question. Next one is develop financial. Okay, I already have answered the questions. Thank you, Dr. Daisy.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhan, for your work. And Dr. Firdous also have questions for Professor Miguel. Professor Miguel, I will read out the questions to you. The questions is okay. SCM working on greater pace by improving services or digitalizations and related innovations are going on. My point is increasing advancement or technology develops a huge gap between unskilled and skilled professionals in case of developing countries. Even in developed countries, people are losing jobs. At what cost SCB can engage unskilled professionals if possible? If not, what are the ways ahead for job losers? Professor Miguel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Daisy, and thank you for the question. Yes, indeed, we had this problem before coronavirus outbreak about the pace of the technology and the digitalization, the digital revolution. But actually, yeah, this is a problem that we had. For instance, when we fully automate the lift trucks in the warehouse or in the supply chain, I mean, these skilled professionals lose their jobs because the lift trucks in the warehouse are fully automated now. But, I recently read about this new trend that Professor Ranjith was telling us about, how firms are shifting their supply chains conditions. So I read about this supply chain resilience and how after coronavirus outbreak, firms need to achieve a different resilience, a different concept of resilience. And this new concept was focused on the diversify rather than get shrinked, diversify the supply options like dual sourcing options, for instance, and not reduce, not become more local, but to build alternative sources of work and supplies. And this is actually this diversification of firms regarding their supply or their sources of resources are a really interesting opportunity for developing countries, because the losing jobs that we had after before the coronavirus outbreak are going to take that opportunity if this global supply chain decide to reopen or to make broader the supply, their supply alternatives in the world. So they need to find new locations to provide their resources. And of course, this is an opportunity on one side for these skilled professionals to get on board again in the supply chains. However, unskilled professionals, it could be difficult. And I had another answer for this. And I like to see opportunities for unskilled professionals talking about global value chains. Okay. Global value chains are also struggling because of the COVID-19. And but firms need to climb up through the global value chain. In this case, unskilled professionals, it's possible to find a job. Talking about unskilled professionals, of course, it's probably they could find a proper job according to their skills in the low levels of global value chains. So of course, if we ask a firm, nobody wants unskilled professionals on their companies, but sure, nations have unskilled professionals, and this kind of labor could find a position in these low levels of global value chains, and more in the case of developing countries, of course.
Thank you, Professor Miguel, for your valuable insights. And now comes to the end of our webinar. I would like to summarize the presentations for our keynote speakers, and the presentations implies a few themes in our perspective on sustainable supply chain management. And first is the organizations need to view the sustainability impact of the activity as an integral part of the decision making, as well as to look at the implications of COVID-19 pandemic on sustainable SCM. The second one is to the organization or firms, they need to pay attention to the sustainability impact across the entire value chain, including the individual organization's sustainability level as well as the global risk. And lastly is the opportunity for sustainable SCM and the way forward and the role of technology. And that is the summary of our webinar presentations. Here, I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate all our keynote speakers as well as panelists for the extraordinary and impressive sharings on the SCM. And finally, the AIBPM talk with all keynote speaker has come to an end. And it was a very exciting and interesting talk. Thank you AIBPM for having me. And also thank you AIBPM for inviting all the established keynote speaker as well as panelists. And thanks to all the panelists and participants that have followed the webinar until the very end. I would love to see you again on the next webinar on August 25th, 2020 with the topic on strategic financial management. And thank you very much for joining the webinar today and have a great day ahead. Yeah, that's all for today. And I understand that we exceeded the time, but I would like to congratulate to all the keynote speakers for your extraordinary and stunning presentations on SCM. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the panelists for your point of view, as well as
Thank you.
the rest to the keynote speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Daisy. This is the end of our webinar. We have come to the final of today's program. Hopefully you get all necessary, fruitful, and engaging breakthrough knowledge on sustainable supply chain management. On behalf of Universitas Negeri Malang and AIBPM, would like to say thank you to you all, keynote speakers, panelists, moderator, participants, as well as the committee. If you still have questions regarding the topic and presentation today, please don't hesitate to comment to our webinar YouTube channel. And the link has been put in the chat room. I am Aulia Herdiani. Thank you and see you on our next webinar on 25th August 2020.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Daisy and
Thank
your
you,
team.
everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a
Dr.
good
Daisy.
day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
professors.